You know, when you produce a newscast, you look for transitional vehicles. How do you get from something heavy to something light, and you kind of put a neutral story in between? I don't have anything neutral to put in here. We're just going to make a shift to the lighter side. But I do want to say how much we respect the four individuals we've been talking about here today, and they're all missed greatly. And that one part of why we do the Geezers is to salute people who have left us. Another reason to do the Geezers is to talk about things that our members have come up with that are new and exciting, and often that takes the form of a book. How was that for a transition? The book I want to talk about is In Bed with Broadcasting. It's a memoir written by Ken Davis. Ken, come on up here and take a seat up here in the front, so you'll be in the wings. You all remember, those of you who are old enough, you remember George Putnam, okay? I'm going to paraphrase a line from George and tell you that Ken has been once around the clock, once around the dial.
That's right.
So let me tell you about the dial, okay? He's managed to work for every LA TV broadcast station.
I couldn't hold a job.
Couldn't hold a job. Joel Tater and I met him at KNXT in the late 70s. Then he was at Network News at CBS TV City for 4 years. He produced Eyewitness Video in the 90s. It's Worth What in 2010. He was a producer on the game show You Deserve It in 2011. He was the head writer for Personalities in the early 90s and a fill-in host for Why in the World, KCET, right?
Yes.
Yep, okay. There were 2 long hitches at KTLA Channel 5 in the 80s and again in the early part of this century. He was assignment editor at the old KHJ Channel 9, now KCAL, and a producer and substitute anchor at KCOP Channel 13 in the late 70s. And you folks thought you had worked in a lot of places. Ken, beyond all that, is an all-around good guy, a friend, and a terrific talent, and I really recommend his book. This thing is really well written. It's absolutely a delight, whether he is telling you about firsthand stories with Phil Spector, to Mae West, to Henry Fonda, to Walter Cronkite, and a very memorable dinner the two of them had at the Formosa Cafe. It's all in the book. And the adventures of Ken's mistress, which he will explain. Ladies and gentlemen, Ken Davis.
Thank you, Bob. And we just saw what a fine producer Bob Tarlow is to make a rough transition like that from the obituary section to entertainment. But well done. As Bob mentioned, I worked with him at Channel 2, and I also worked with another charter member or former person who organized this group, Joel Tater at Channel 2, Two on the Town. And Joel was also nice enough when I was a nobody, which I still pretty much am, but to invite me out of college to come watch him produce the Tom Snyder Show, or the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder. I am honored and humbled to be in front of this group. I know about a third of you, and there's no fake news in this room. I mean, this is an honorable group of people, and I'm not just saying this. Kelly, there's hundreds of women out there that are in this industry because you gave them the confidence that they could do it, maybe without you even realizing it. And there's some truly talented, nice people. I also want to make a quick public service announcement. Do not use the restroom in the other area as we normally do when we meet here. I walked back there, and for some reason, they could tell that I wasn't Italian because it's the Italian-American group with the name Davis, and they distinctly told me to use the facilities up here. And as Warren Cheragino can tell you, you don't want to mess with the Italians. The title of the book, I'm going to be brief because everybody wants dessert. It's Saturday, it's a beautiful day, and frankly, I want to sell a couple of books. But the book is called In Bed with Broadcasting, but it has nothing to do with the current casting couch stories and tawdry tales, although Steve Edwards and Charlie Rose are in the book, but it's during better times. It's because she was my mistress, and I think that applies to most everyone here. You give up things for your mistress. Beautiful, exciting on the outside, but she can be cold and cunning on the inside. So that's the broadcasting story, where I got the title. Real quickly, Bob went through it. Because a lot of you are saying, who the hell is this guy? And why would he have all these stories? But I grew up here in Pasadena, went off to Flagstaff, Arizona. Somehow I became the youngest anchorman in the country at the age of 19. And of course it was Flagstaff and nobody else wanted the job, but I guess, and I worked cheap, literally for like $300 a week. I was a reporter up in San Luis Obispo at the fabled KSBY, then came back to Los Angeles where I produced the news at Channel 13, where I met the lovely Phil Spector, and there's a good story about that in there. Then I went on to Channel 2 with great talents like these guys. I only lasted a year, then I went over to TV City, where I had the honor to work with network legends, and I believe Geezer's members like David Browning, who is one of the finest producers in the country. He actually produced, if you saw last Sunday's 60 Minutes 50th anniversary special, David Browning produced that. Terry Drinkwater, Linda Douglas, folks like that. Then I got a little big in my britches, and I decided I could go to PBS and McNeil Lehrer NewsHour. Well, it was at that point a half-hour show. They decided to make it a one-hour show, and I moved to Denver and was a producer for them. Decided I missed California, was starting a family, came back, stayed at KTLA for 6 years as an assignment editor and a producer. Then left once again to go work with Charlie Rose, who at that time I thought was the finest question. No, a great guy. Oh, I have no stories on Charlie, but and produced a show called Personalities, and that lasted a grand total of a year, and then I was all over the place. Eyewitness Video, which we had the problem of being up against 60 Minutes. Extra, which I devote 3 chapters to in the book, which was the craziest place I ever worked in my life. And I think everyone in this room, you're a tough audience. You see, I talked last week to a group, I launched the book about 2 weeks ago at Vroman's, and that was friends and family, and you can impress them easily when you say things like you went out drinking with Walter Cronkite, or you did this. This group, everyone in here has hung out with presidents and senators and senators, and sometimes they're the same. But so you're a tough group to impress. But anyways, because I'm not well known, and because who just wants to read, you know, a brag book about, gee, I did this, and hi Hunter, this guy and I had some great experiences at CBS. He just retired, the great Hunter Block. So I decided, instead of making it a brag book, who would want to read that? I decided to make it an adventure novel, where it has its ups and downs and a story about my mistress, and there's 3 story arcs: the fascinating people I met and places I worked, the roller coaster ride of journalism. I call it from the big news to fake news, and what has happened to our industry. And actually, Joe Saltzman, who's another member of this group, is in the book, where we discuss ways to improve the credibility of journalists in this country. When I was at CBS, we couldn't even put a political bumper sticker on our car, because it would make us look like we were biased. And God knows we've come a long way since then, and not in a good direction. Then the final story arc is the way a mistress messes with your private life. And I think, once again, everyone in here can testify to that. You know, she's, as I say, glamorous on the outside, but can be cold on the inside, and what we give up for family. And I try to make it light and funny and have some jokes. So, and as I said, I'm going to keep it brief, but some of the headlines are spending the night on the town with Walter Cronkite at the wonderful Formosa Cafe in Hollywood. And it was 2 weeks after Walter left the anchor desk, and no one really knew why. He allowed Dan Rather to take over, even though Walter was at the top of the ratings. With a few scotches in him, he tells me some stories, and also gives me some advice on everything from women to the news business, to Phil Spector, who couldn't be with us today. He's, although I wanted him to be here, he's serving 18 years to life up north. But Phil, during the 70s, for some reason, maybe this showed how bad taste he had, our little Channel 13 News was his favorite newscast. It was the lowest rated newscast in town. But he fell in love with our anchor woman, Hetty Lynn Herdes, and invited us to come up to his castle. And this was not the one in Alhambra where the murder later occurred, but it was in Beverly Hills. And so we would go up there after Bill Diaz, if any of you real old timers remember that name. He was the anchor man. We started going up there every night after the show. And it was on from 10 to 11, and I'm a kid in my 20s. And it was, met Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, John Lennon called, all kinds of fun things. He recorded an album with us. But Phil tended to drink quite a bit. And near the end of the chapter, he pulls a gun on me and my 2 best buddies, and I end chapter 2 with a gun pointed at my head. Fun guy. Walter Cronkite totally unexpected calls I'm going to be brief because I know we want to move along here, and I promised Bob I wouldn't. They had to cut me off at Romans. Walter Cronkite calls the CBS hotline. He'd been covering the space shuttle. He wants a ride to the Beverly Hills Hotel. We normally would assign it to Norman, who was the guy that would transport bigwigs around town. But I made an executive decision and said, I'm going to take Walter Cronkite. And he and I went out to dinner and had a blast. Mae West, get another mysterious phone call at CBS that Mae West had died, and then hangs up the phone. And I happen to know she lived at the Ravenswood apartment in the Hancock Park district of town. And there's a story about sneaking into that apartment building and riding up the stairs and discovering Mae West in a sleeping bag, and she wasn't alive. So that's another fun story. The final interview with Henry Fonda. Who else am I forgetting? Oh, the Hillside Strangler, another great guy. Working at Channel 2, trying to make a name for myself. Another reporter and I, Judd Rose, who we sadly lost. He was working for KFWB at the time. We're outside Angelo Bono's upholstery shop, and at the time he was a suspect in the Hillside Strangler case. It's midnight, a Saturday night. He gets in his car. We decide to follow him on a dark, secluded street in Glendale. About 1 a.m, he pulls over and comes up to our car, and he's not pleased. And so that was my encounter with the Hillside Strangler. Lots more fun stuff. So, and then I get into the world of journalism, where I try to come up with ideas, including an accreditation program, or maybe we could call ourselves journalogists, set aside from the people, so-called journalists out there. But you have to go by a certain bylaws of objectivity and things like this. And then I have Joe Saltzman gets involved, and we discuss, and I think there's ways to restore credibility to our industry. I mean, it's not in good shape. So, in a nutshell, I'm not going to read from the book. I want people to have dessert and enjoy it. I try to be funny. I think there's stories packed with people you all know, and I hope you enjoy it. And I'm honored to be in front of such a fine group of people. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks, Ken. I'm going to call for questions in a minute, but I've got one for you. I hope you don't mind I asked the same one I asked at Vromans 2 weeks ago, which was basically when you read the book, you realize he's tied this whole theme of a mistress, after all, the book is called In Bed with Broadcasting, and he teases the end of each chapter with the theme of what his mistress took him to next. And when you read it, you think, what a great original idea. And I'm just wondering, how'd you come up with the mistress concept?
I thought, much as I thought no one would be interested in reading a story about I did this, especially since I'm not famous, I wanted, and I try to put myself in that situation. What kind of book would I want to read? And so I suddenly, it came to me, I remember distinctly driving on the 405 freeway, lovely 405 freeway, and thinking, well, she really is my mistress. I will do anything for her, but it's a one-way street. I love my mistress, but she doesn't always love me. And so, but we had some fantastic adventures. I mean, we met presidents, serial killers, as much of, as many of you have. But she also, I went through a divorce, possibly because of her. I had to question my ethics. And I wasn't always proud of what I did, to make a buck. And then we have all had to sometimes hold our nose and do certain things. So that's where the mistress idea came from. And then I also decided to name every chapter after a song, because I started out as a DJ. Coconino County Cut Up California Ken, cranking out the cream of the crop on KEOS. Thank you. So I love music. So Stranglers in the Night and different, every chapter so I just tried to make it fun. And if I may give it a plug, Joe said he liked it more than Dan Rather's memoir because it was more fun. I didn't want to take myself too seriously. Too many people take themselves too seriously.
Thanks, good answer. Are there questions? And if you don't mind, if you've got questions, I'd like to have Vinny swing the camera around to you, and I'll bring a mic to you, just so we have this on tape, okay?
Hi, Ken.
Hi.
Hi. I know you already touched on this, but what changes have you seen in the news business since those days?
I think 2018 is such a critical year in our democracy, and I don't want to make this political, but our industry is under attack, and democracy and a free press rise and fall together. And whether or not journalists are telling the truth or not, if people are led to believe that it's all fake news, then they're just going to listen to their social connections, their friends, the internet, and we could be in big trouble. And I think there's a real need, both on our parts as journalists, to, and I have respect for everyone in this room, but right now, anyway, it's a very scary time. I'm a big believer in the PBS NewsHour and NPR. Sadly, the days of going down the middle, as I said, like with Cronkite said to me he said one of the worst things that happened to our business was the show 60 Minutes, because 60 Minutes proved you could make a lot of money with news, and local stations picked up on, eyewitness news, and let's capture them, flash and trash, and the hell with the truth. And that's scary times. And a democracy needs an informed, I don't want to get too serious on this, but if we don't have an informed populace, we're in deep trouble. And we are setting the stage for dictatorship. And so it's dangerous times. Fake news.
The book is in bed with broadcasting. It is for sale in the table in the back. Ken and Carol Davis will sell you a copy, and Ken will gladly autograph it. And congratulations on a really, really nicely written book. And I hope everybody in here buys a copy or borrows a copy and enjoys it a lot. Ken, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, we're going to follow up on a story that we brought you last year. We had Tom Colbert was here with his wife, and they told us the story of what led up to his quest in finding out who was the real D.B. Cooper. Tom's quite sure he has 100% identified the person who is still alive and was at the time D.B. Cooper. So I'd like to have Tom take a couple of minutes, update us. There have been a couple of new developments. And Tom Colbert on stage.
Thank you, everybody. All right, everybody, shake out your giggles and your rolling eyes, because when I was on the desk at KCBS, every 3 or 4 months, I'd get a Cooper call. It's my husband, it's my uncle. We got a call in 2011 from a cameraman I trust in Las Vegas, who found a guy who wanted to get something off his chest. That led to a cold case team, a 40-member cold case team, 23 of them feds, 13 FBI, and with the FBI's permission of collaboration, we gathered 102 pieces of evidence, including DNA, including interviews with 2 wives, his sister on her deathbed. We absolutely have D.B. Cooper. He is a retired professor at UC Riverside. You can find him at his boat shop. He's at the Yacht Club too. He has a boat called, I'm not making this up, Poverty Sucks. This is D.B. Cooper. Now, for a year ago, we had a 4-hour History Channel documentary on this. When we turned in the evidence, the week it was scheduled, the door was slammed on us. And the FBI said, we no longer want a circumstantial case. And you can imagine that'd be a good excuse after 40 years and lousy DNA and bad interviews and so forth. But we had great stuff. But they wouldn't accept it. And they said to us, but you know what? If you find the parachute and money, let us know. Well, my wife and I did something. We're Californians, and we did it well. And that is we sued their ass. We sued the FBI and the Department of Justice to find out what was in the file. We had no idea what was in the file. We took a risk. And the cold case team and I were very, very surprised. First, we got tipped to how Cooper got away. And one of his 3 crime partners, all veterans, told the story in '97 to a couple who came to us. And the information checks out with the FOIA that we won last January, a year ago January, on our website, dbcooper.com. They've been dumping pages. And lo and behold, you read about 7 farmers witnessing them practicing with a small plane and a car with lights to pick them up and fly out using 3 airstrips and 3 planes. This is in the FBI documents. we have one of the storytellers, one of the crime partners, tells the couple in 97 and they come to us. All the details match. Then we find an LA Times article. Back in the day when the LA Times would cover the nation, they sent a reporter up, interviewed the same farmers. The reason that's important, and this has been our frustration, we've been getting the documents redacted. And you would not believe what they're redacting. They're redacting the airstrips, the towns, the dead witnesses, even the reference to D.B. Cooper. And we're all thinking, what are they doing? They archived this last year, the case is closed, and they're taking everything out on our evidence. Well, we continue, and we get tipped not only to the escape, but the dig spot, where they put the parachute and the money. Again, according to this one of 3 crime partners that told the story. This couple that was told this dug up old maps, and it turned out to be up a deep canyon in the mountains at a 90-degree curve, the only curve of its kind. There was a lumberjack trail. They followed it 300 yards out to a tree. We dug at that tree. We found 5 materials. We gave it to the FBI. We also found 2 of the 3 crime partners still alive, in their 80s, Korean War veterans. We gave that to the FBI. We also gave them the location so they could do their own CSI. Did nothing for 4.5 months. Now we're really confused. They told us this is what they wanted. My attorney, one of 3, Mark Zaid, who's never charged me a dime in 25 years, don't tell him I told you that. He does history for free. He's an amazing man out of Washington. He launched that FOIA, and he wrote a letter to the director, current director, and said, paraphrasing, we did what you wanted. No response to the letter, even after turning in the evidence. Meanwhile, things are coming into our website from the government, gritting their teeth, they're sending stuff over, redacting what they can. Now, if anybody knows the story as well as I do, there were 4 letters sent after the jump. Cut and pasted like the Zodiac Killer, 3 of the 4, one handwritten. Ha ha, you can't catch me. There was a 5th letter that came in our FOIA that none of us knew about. It was typed. And it was the letter that the FBI said, holy cow, he's alive. We found the first reference to the word excited in an FBI memo about this letter. They started checking other disgruntled pilots to find him because of the typing. They thought it could be that. D.B. Cooper mentioned several things. He mentioned I wore a toupee, I had makeup on, and here's the key. He said, and I left no prints in the back of the plane. That was secret until 1984 when the first FBI agent put it in a book. Wasn't really publicized. For example, on the History Channel program we did with the FBI, they said they used those lines for disinformation. They said to us, well, if your guy's prints aren't in the back, he obviously didn't do it. There were no prints in the back of the plane. We learned this a year ago through the FOIA. They believed this letter. Here's the key thing that happened. I took that letter, released it, gave it to my cold case team, and there is a man on the cold case team I brought in. He's one of 12 people in Vietnam with our suspect, Robert W. Rackstraw Sr. And they had codes back then. They all went to coding school before joining First Cav. And this man gets the letter and he calls me. This poor man, 70 years old, still has 11 codes in his head. I kidded him, what do you, stare at the TV and pick them out there too? He really knows the codes, and he called and said, give me 2 weeks. He went through every code, and lo and behold, what does he find at the bottom of the letter? 3 military units written in gobbledygook with numbers and letters. And the most important thing is 2 of the 3 were top secret into the late 80s. And we realized our guy wrote this. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this was the letter the FBI declared as real in memos. Well, our code breaker, without telling me, went and looked at the 4 other letters, the 3 cut and paste, 1 handwritten. He called me a week and a half ago and said, Tom, there are damn codes in every one of these. He finds their taunts, their instructions to his partners, but the first one is, will the FBI find me? This is in military code translated. Will the FBI find me? I am CIA if I'm caught. Now, that was the key thing. We have discovered 17 references to this man, from his former commanders, to court records, to police reports, and yes, friends. He started going out with the CIA in Vietnam off the books 2 to 3 days at a time. His commander watched him leave in a stolen commander's jeep with a 50 cal loaded with explosives with CIA next to him. We believe the reason they won't charge this man, and this is what we had a news conference about in front of the FBI building in Washington, D.C. 2 days ago. We talked about the stonewalling, the lying, and the disinformation the FBI has been putting out on this man. Because it's our team's belief now, he was a black ops CIA pilot. Now, the reason we know that, we have deep sources from my team in the FBI and in other agencies, and they learned that he was flying from Laos, and that's in court records too, Laos, South America, even Nicaragua, for the next 2 decades, from the 70s to 80s. So, this has been quite a journey. My 2 kids went from middle school to college in 7 years. Yesterday was the last day in my 7th year, and Valentine's Day is my 25th wedding anniversary. Guess what I've promised my wife? I'll give you a hint. It was something you used to see on the set, right? And it has a double meaning to her. Cooper is over. We're stopped our criminal investigation. We have a second group of producers that want to make another documentary on the escape, on the dig and finish the dig, and of course the coding. I have press releases from 2 days ago I'll bring you. And one other thing you should know. There have been 24 books on Cooper. Only one has an ending. And only one has been awarded, not once, but three times national awards for true crime. I thank Tom Solicy, the co-writer, and of course this incredible cold case team. And if you go up on dbcooper.com, you can see who they are. You can read the testimonials. And as I like to say, don't tell my wife, stay tuned.
Hey, everybody, anybody got any questions for Tom?
There was a question, how much money did DB Cooper get away with?
The question was, how much money did D.B. Cooper get away with?
200,000. You should know in these, and that's over $1 million in today's money. What you should know is part of the escape, and it's posted on the website, is that after taking off on the first airstrip, he dropped 50 grand into Vancouver Lake, which used to be a curly arm of the Columbia until it broke away 1,000 years ago. And guess what it sits across from, less than a mile away? Tenabar. What happened is D.B. Cooper, according to this crime partner that told the story in '97, they dropped $50,000 into Vancouver Lake, along with the briefcase bomb, so it would look like he drowned. Well, it went straight into the mud for 9 years. In 1976, there was a dredging in that lake. We have the Army Corps of Engineer background to prove it, and that floodplain between Tenabar and the lake floods once or twice a year. They did a dredging from the lake. We believe that money that was found, not the surface money, we believe he planted that so that he could get off. It didn't work the first time. He had a drug partner, you'll read about him in here, that planted those 3 bundles with crumbling rubber bands still on them 8 years later, a few inches in the sand. He had no idea that the dredging had washed his stuff onto the beach of Tenabar, and those that watched the national news never heard this. As we all know, after the national cameras go, the deep detail stays local. And so the agent in charge of the beach says to the guys on day 2, well, keep digging, maybe we'll find his bones and who knows, maybe the bomb. 3.5 feet down, they find a complete layer of shards of the $20 bills of D.B. Cooper that were dumped in the lake 8 years before. There is video of that at an ABC station. That is part of the next documentary. It totally backs up the whole theory of dumping that was said in 71, passed on in 97, and discovered in 80 by that local camera crew. Long answer. And you tell I'm winded, huh? Yes, sir.
Why stop investigating now? You have an anniversary every year.
This is the, I actually married one of my heroes of my stories. I'll tell you about her another day. The criminal case is over. The FBI will not, they've decided not to address this. As far as this whole CIA angle, that was in their face 2 days ago, and I've been told from some of my FBI guys who have contacts, they don't know what to do about that angle. Because that's the one thing, personally, I think they could break it open. But as far as this old case, they made a decision after we came up with all that evidence. They said, holy cow, we're going to be embarrassed. We thought this was about embarrassment. They don't want to have citizens, let alone FBI in a courtroom with them. No, it had to do with the CIA connection. That's what we know now. Any other questions? Thank you. God bless.
Tom, hold the book up. This is another really good read, by the way. It's always nice to see our people doing books. The Last Master Outlaw by Tom Colbert and Tom Slazolski, right?
Right. And Don Ray is one of our 40 members on the team.
Who you're going to meet in just a moment. Available on Amazon. Okay? Good read. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. And finally, and I'll open this up to anybody else who wants to speak, but Don Ray, who is featured prominently in the History Channel documentary that was done about D.B. Cooper, featuring Tom. Don has something to tell you that's completely off the subject.
Okay. Thanks very much. I promised him 1 minute, so I'll talk fast. A lot of the people in this room know what it's like to suffer from the changes in journalism and the changes in life when you get old. And there are probably some of you that might relate to things like your spouse getting laid off work 2 days before Christmas, both your cars going dead, getting a month behind on your house payment, not having any credit left or any savings, and you're in a jam. What you need to know is the 8 Ball Foundation is the place to go. You might be reluctant to do it, but they will come through for you. And I'm one of the people that wants to stand up here and say, that's the situation I was in just this last Christmas. And the 8 Ball Foundation came through, and now I'm putting my life back together because of them. So I really recommend that you contribute to 8 Ball Foundation, and don't be afraid to call on them. Did I do it in a minute?
You did it. That's very nice of you. Normally, the recipients of 8 Ball Foundation grants are confidential, but occasionally you get a situation like Don who wants to come forward, and he told me he wanted to identify himself, so that's why he has. Normally, we never do that. Thank you. We had 66 people here today. Pretty good number. Our meeting days coming up this year are Saturday, May the 12th. We're going to do a Hollywood panel. Saturday, August 11th, and Saturday, November the 10th. I want to ask you all to please return these name tags to Michael or Gary when you leave. And drive very carefully. This group means as much to me as it does to all of you. It has reignited friendships between people who haven't seen each other in years. And when I hear from people that they've seen other people and they now see them on a social basis, even though they haven't seen each other or worked together in 30 years, that kind of makes this all worthwhile. Thank you very much. God bless you. See you on May the 12th.